Hey, sports fans
Hey.
and Atlanta. Welcome to the Atlanta Sports Unlimited YouTube channel. And we have a name for our show now. Officially, we are going to be known as NFL Jocks and Pigskins. Thanks for joining us. With Tom Pollen, I'm Dave Holcomb. We have another fun episode for you this Saturday afternoon on the East Coast, Saturday morning where Tom is in Chicago.
Yeah.
Going to be talking a lot about the salary cap. Finally set. We've been talking about it all off season, but we finally have an exact number, and it's no longer a moving target where we have to discuss, where teams kind of need to get to. Now we know exactly where teams need to get to, and we'll discuss what specifically what the Falcons need to do to get under the salary cap, what they're doing to try and get there, and what else is happening around the league because of the lower salary cap for the 2021 season. And we'll get to some pro day news as well as we get a little bit closer to the NFL draft, about 5-6 weeks away now. But
yeah, without a combine, the pro days are going to be very important for a lot of teams.
Yeah, and it occurred to me, maybe a week ago or so that the period where we would have had the combine kind of came and went, at least for me. Maybe some other NFL fans more into the combine realized before I did, but that was something I always kind of tune into, at least casually, see what's going on with the rookie class, and we didn't have that this year.
Yeah, I tune into it casually. I've covered the combine, for writing about different teams over the years. As we both have written for different websites. And I'm telling you, I'd rather do it casually because it is a long weekend if you want to write about it for 3 straight days. So,
yeah,
as a writer, I will say I don't miss the combine.
I tend to agree with that. I do think for college writers, it's a nice way to create content for the NFL too.
Yeah.
It's really just all about creating content with the combine and staying on the minds of fans in the off season. But it's particularly helpful for the college football writers because there's a lot less. There's no free agency to discuss. So if you're a college football writer, it's too early to be talking about the next season in February, March. So you're talking about the players going to the NFL draft. That helps. But other than that, yeah, I agree.
Yeah, you're still a couple of months away from spring practices too. So yeah, you have to have something to fill it in with. And football's just so good at this, is just being relevant year round. And I don't see any other sport being able to do what the National Football League has accomplished.
Absolutely, yeah. The NFL has done a tremendous job of creating a year-long schedule calendar to always be at the top of media shows. So, but they're always on our mind here.
Hey.
NFL is in the title of our show, NFL Jocks and Pigskins. So we don't have our producer to start today. Chris is getting his second COVID-19 vaccine, so he's excused for the beginning of the show. But
we're gonna have a link that we could tweet out because it would be nice to get as many people involved as possible.
That is a good question.
And I promised the link to my audience.
Did you? Uh-oh. Well, I'm not sure how to make a link here. I think we are broadcasting. Are we on Facebook?
Yeah. We're broadcasting. Right. We're fine.
I'm not sure.
I'm just giving you a hard time.
Yeah. Okay. That's fair. So we hope Chris will join us a little bit later because clearly I can't produce the show and be on the air at the same time. But I'm doing my best. But so Tom, this week we found out the salary cap was set at $182.5 million. That is, I didn't write down what it was last year, but that's more than 10 million down from last year.
More than 10 million down. Yeah. I think it was about 192, 193 last year.
And normally it goes 10 million up or something like that. So
usually,
this is a big reversal, and we all knew this was coming. This isn't a surprise, but to hammer home again the point of how big this this deduction is in salary cap, I mean, it can't really be overstated that teams for years and years and players for years are under the assumption this will continue to go up and up and up, and it didn't just stay the same. It went down in the opposite direction of what it normally goes up.
Yeah, they've always, the NFL Players Association and the owners always figured, well, this is a decent deal. I don't think it's ever been good for the NFLPA, but, at least they could point to it and say, well, you're getting a little more money as the revenues increase. We're getting a slice of it. So, we're getting a little more money every year. Nobody foresaw this last, the events of this last year that, was going to just destroy attendance, concession sales. I think they still did good on TV money, but, in person, they just, everything cratered and you end up in this situation where as so many teams are struggling just to get below this cap. Would have been okay if the cap had gone up the way it usually does, but are really struggling to get below this cap, and they have till Wednesday at 4 a.m. Eastern or 4 p.m. Eastern time to do it. And there's still a lot of teams that have not made the number yet. So it's going to be interesting. We still got a lot of movement to come in the following week.
I'm using Spot Rack. I know that a lot of people also use Over the Cap, and there's other sites that you can use to track salary cap and contracts in the NFL and really all the sports in the United States, North America, I guess. But according to Spot Rack, there are 7 teams currently over the salary cap. It might have been more when the salary cap was set this past week. But as of Saturday afternoon, early Saturday afternoon on the East, we got the Packers, Chiefs, Falcons, Eagles, Saints, Bears, and Rams. Yes. Still got work to do, and in some cases, a lot of work to do. The Saints, Bears, and Rams are all at least $10 million over the salary cap.
Yeah, the Bears are $23 million over.
Yeah,
but that's because they just tagged Allen Robinson, wide receiver, who there's a lot of speculation whether they were going to let him become a free agent or try and get him re-signed to a long-term deal. Well, they signed him to the cap number, but until they can get a long-term deal in place, you're stuck with the cap number to be able to work with under the the new rules. So, yeah, that puts them $23 million under, and they have a lot of work to do. Rams, I don't know how they're going to get there. They have a lot of renegotiating to do over the next few days. It's amazing that they could be $32 million under, but they've been shooting for the Super Bowl. Their window was wide open for a Super Bowl try, and that's when you spend the money. That's when you try to get that last player that's going to plug in and be the difference maker in your Super Bowl push.
Right.
So it's not in a way it is, in a way it isn't surprising to see the Rams so far over. Jalen Ramsey, they just picked up Matthew Stafford. That's a big contract.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, 2 of these teams in the bottom 4 salary cap trade away their quarterbacks this year, this offseason, the Eagles and the Rams. And I don't remember the exact details of those deals, but I know that a big chunk of salary cap is being dedicated to Carson Wentz in Philadelphia and then Jared Goff in Los Angeles. And then and also with the Rams, you got Matthew Stafford's contract. So
yep.
That they've done that to themselves, those 2 teams. And relating this back to the Falcons, I mean, that's what we want the Falcons to avoid doing, is adding that big cap hit for Matt Ryan to play somewhere else.
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, we talked about this last week with the Falcons. They had so many 6 players who were taking up 2/3 of their cap. And you can't do that. It's just ridiculous to think that you could have so few players that make up such a large part of your spending. But again, you had the Falcons who were thinking that we weren't far away. We were close. We have Matt Ryan. You have Matt Ryan, you're always close. So, and I can't say that I argue with them. You have a top quarterback. Yeah, there's a lot of things that can happen for you during a season. He had a down year. So now all of a sudden you're stuck with, especially Dante Fowler Jr., who, he's not going anywhere. And he has a huge cap hit. So you're going to have to renegotiate him at some point. You got to get his contract stretched out. You can do that. You can spread out bonus money over the course of the contract, extend a year, and kind of push money forward. The main thing is you're trying to push money to a point where you're in a better cap situation, where the cap has gone up for a couple of years, and you're not getting burned at the cap this year. You can move that total out a little bit further, and you still have, you can create cap space this year, and you still have cap space existing as the cap goes up in following years. So this cap silence is really, it'll explode your mind if you let it. Just
yeah, I mean, these GMs and other front office guys in the NFL, particularly, really are paid a lot because the salary cap is complicated, and if you mess it up, you really put your team at a disadvantage for years in order to get out of salary cap hell, is usually kind of the phrase that has been used in the NFL and used in hockey as well.
Yeah, well, hockey has a hard cap. You can't even move money around in hockey. So
and that's why I think it's more fan friendly in the sense of it's easier to understand. It's hard to understand the NFL salary cap, and that's my point. In that's why they're paid the big bucks, to know the ways around it.
Yeah, so it's going to be interesting to see. Now, I didn't catch up with the Falcons earlier this week, but you said Jake Matthews has taken a renegotiation to get his cap number down a little bit.
Yes, they converted his $13 million base salary into a signing bonus. The Falcons did with Jake Matthews, and they lowered his cap hit by almost $7 million. Before that move, the Falcons were more than $14 million over the salary cap, so they basically cut what they had to get down to in half. But the kind of to your point about the yin and the yang of restructuring deals is Jake Matthews' cap hit went up for next year, and I believe it also went up a little bit for 2023. So I don't necessarily think that's bad for the Falcons. I haven't looked ahead to what their cap situation is for next year. Could be completely different whether or not they keep Matt Ryan. But I think for the Falcons, and really for every team, you're in the situation right now where you're just trying to get by for 2021 because of coronavirus. Everybody's trying to just get by in their life too, just until things get back to normal. And I think I'm okay with the Falcons taking that approach of, all right, if we're going to restructure, we'll take more cap hit for these restructured deals next year and the year after. We'll figure it out then. By 2022, 2023, the salary cap is going to be going up again.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thinking in all 32 front offices. Let's get to a point where we can at least deal with this. And a lot of teams aren't going to be able to make any free agent signings as they move forward. You're going to have a lot of teams that have problems. Some teams like Jacksonville, the Jets, the Patriots, all are doing very well under the cap.
Yeah,
you're going to see a lot of teams that are kind of on the cusp of challenging, like the Chargers. Some would say the Raiders. They're going to have a chance to plug in some important pieces. This is going to have a big impact on who we consider favorites for 2021 as far as division champs and Super Bowl contenders, because there's a lot of teams that have the opportunity there are teams on the list who have the opportunity to make some moves. And there are going to be a lot of quality players out there because a lot of teams had to cut and restructure to get themselves to a point where they can operate during the league year with the new league year that's coming up on Wednesday.
Yeah, and that's something that I overlooked myself. I know before the show you mentioned that was something you were going to keep your eye on, and that you knew was going to happen. To me, I just overlooked the fact that, my mind was all on, well, if salary cap's going down, that means teams are not going to be able to sign as many people. What it also means is these veterans that are on deals that are bloated towards the end of their contract. They're not worth that much anymore. They're being released, but they're still very good player or a good player above average.
Yeah.
And a lot of those veterans are pricing themselves out basically and finding themselves unemployed in a situation where the salary cap's gone down. So there's not as much salary cap space to sign. And there's a lot of veterans available. So your price tag is going to go down. It's going to be, if you have the space, it's going to be a very friendly team-oriented free agency period, yes, because there will be a lot of players available that are good and probably not overpriced, at least not as overpriced as normal.
Right, exactly. Even if you are a quality free agent on the market and you find a team with cap room who wants you, yeah, you're not going to get that same contract. It's not going to be there. I don't think it's going to be there for a couple of years. I think teams are going to kind of rein back a little bit and be a little bit more cautious with how they spend their money in the next, 2 or 3 seasons to try and get their cap situations back under control, get long-term contracts. Excuse me. Get long-term contracts back under a number that they can handle. So I think this is going to impact a couple of years. It's going to be interesting to see.
I was going to ask you, are we going to see a lot more one-year deals? But I guess you kind of answered that question. If you think if this is a multi-year thing that the NFL is going to work itself through, then as a player, I'm probably not looking at a one-year contract and then hitting free agency again next year.
You're taking a gamble doing that because you never know what your injury situation is going to be.
Yeah.
But a player might say, yeah, I'll take a one-year contract because I know that the cap will go up in 2022 and maybe I can negotiate a better deal for myself after this next season is over when we start getting back to more normalcy as far as revenues. So, they might take that one-year deal thinking it's a toss-up because you could get injured, could lose overall if you take that one-year deal and gamble that you're going to get a better contract in 2023.
Yeah.
So I think players might actually go for that one-year shot. I don't think there's going to be a lot of long-term deals coming up this year. I think a lot of it's going to be a very conservative year in free agency unless you're a top of the line player, really proven performer over the last few years. But then, you only have a few teams that you can go to. As I say, Jaguars, Jets, the Colts. Colts have a good cap situation. You might want to go to the Colts. It might help the Colts become a Super Bowl contender this year.
Yeah.
They have room to sign a couple of important players, and you never know. It might put them over the top for the season. So, I mean, you're not going to have a lot of options. So maybe you take that one-year deal and hope you end up with a better team in the following year too.
Yeah, I think you made a lot of good points there. The one I want to go back to is the one-year contract discussion. It kind of goes against the point you made. I thought that was important was the injury, that you're betting on yourself staying healthy if you go for the one-year deal.
Yeah.
And that's never been the mindset of the average player. They've always wanted the bonus money, the guaranteed contracts, because they know they're going to get hurt. So it kind of would be hypocritical for a lot of players to come out and say, well, yeah, I want a one-year contract and hit free agency again next year. So I guess that probably eliminates that, or that's another factor that goes against the one year contract.
I'm not saying this is a guarantee that it's going to be a lot of 1 year deals. I'm just saying that's one scenario that presents itself. I could see that happening where players want to, make it through 2021. Let's just get through this season. It's going to be a tougher year as far as salary. So, let's make it through this season and see what we can do after the season's over. But, as I say, real quality players that are out there. I called up a list not too long ago of some of the players that, are out and looking for jobs. Shaq Barrett, defensive end who had a hell of a playoff season this past year, is going to command more than a single season. Aaron Jones might, get a couple of years. He's on the market. So you got free agents that are out there that might be able to swing multi-year deals. But as you go deeper into the free agent class, I don't see a lot of names that are going to get you more than 1 year. Juju Smith-Schuster maybe. But, there's a lot of iffiness both with players with their health. Sometimes they've had health problems. Sometimes they've had maybe they had a down year. It's rough to see a lot of these guys getting anything more than a 1 year deal on this list. The NFL lists their top 101 free agents, and it's an interesting list of names. A lot of good list of names, but some of them are coming off of injury too. So you never know what you're going to get.
Yeah.
Eric Fisher, with the Chiefs, left tackle, and they missed him in the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Blew out his Achilles. Well, you're not really going to sign him to big money. Once his Achilles is healed, he's worthwhile for quite a long time. Tackles tend to have a fairly long career. But is that going to offer him a multi-year deal just to lock him in because you're not going to have him for 2021? Yeah, so you got a lot of injuries you have to consider too. As far as if you're going to lock in a player, if you're not going to lock in a player.
Absolutely. And we're going to get to that list of free agents. I have a list of I would say notable releases from this past week. I wasn't looking at just for that list you pulled up was guys going into free agency anyway. That just
guys who were also cut.
Guys that were also cut. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
because Aaron Jones was a free agent. It wasn't Shaq Barrett a free agent. Juju Smith-Schuster is a free agent.
Mm-hmm.
We'll get to more of those notable names that were cut this week and other free agents in a little bit. I want to circle back to the Falcons. I also wanted to circle back to Allen Robinson if there's time, and make the point that about the Falcons, how they get under this cap. What they've done with Jake Matthews, I think they're also going to have to do with Deion Jones and Grady Jarrett. You mentioned that last week. And the other notable Falcons news this week, they re-signed kicker Younghoe Koo, which if you're not counting that Kansas City game where he missed the shot there, could have sent that game into overtime. Koo has had a very good Falcons career, a year and a half in Atlanta. He's been a very good kicker. It's been exceptional at onside kicks. He's pretty much been the only kicker that's been able to get his team to recover onside kicks.
Yeah.
Unless, I guess you're kicking against the Falcons. Dallas Cowboys come to mind. I won't bring that up again for Falcons fans. No. We won't dive into that any further than I already have. And the other notable signing for the Falcons this week was Jaden Graham. Not a huge re-signing, but they only had one tight end on the active roster before they re-signed Graham. So now they at least have two tight ends, and he signed for under $1 million.
It's surprising for a team that had a surplus of tight ends only a couple of years ago that they only had one on the roster. Right. But
The other point I wanted to make about the Falcons today, they only have 41 players on the active roster according to Spot Rack. And we always look at the number of where they are salary cap wise, 7 million under or 7 million over, 14 million over. But if you look at that combined with the number of players signed already, the Eagles are in about the same situation, just 1 million over where the Falcons are. They have 65 players signed, 16 more players than the Falcons have. So that means, if the Eagles just get down to 0, they probably have their roster set other than their draft class. If they can do that. However, the Falcons, they don't have enough players to make a roster yet. They got to sign 10 more players to just get up to 51, 52 active players on Sundays. And that's not practice squad. That's not the draft class. So the Falcons are in a worse situation than just being 7 million over the cap because they have a lot of players that they still have to bring in. And there's fewer players that they have to restructure that are already on their roster. Potentially the Eagles have, 15 more players that they can go to and say, hey, can we restructure your contract to make a little space? Falcons have less of that, and they really don't have any roster depth. They have to create some salary cap space to just fill out the roster, let alone create depth on the roster.
Yeah, 41 players on the roster is not going to cut it. This is, and that's the thing. They're going to have to make some signings, and it's going to be at the bottom of the free agent class, unfortunately.
There's two teams that have there's 2 teams that have less than 50 players signed right now. And the other one, other than the Falcons, is the Chargers. They have 45 players. So the Falcons being at 41 is it's astronomically low, to be honest.
Right.
That low number of players and that far over the salary cap. It goes to your point that you've been making, that 2/3 of the cap hit is going towards 5 or 6 players. Right.
And that's the thing. Jarrett's going to have to be renegotiated. Fowler, Deion Jones. I don't know if Ryan, how you could stretch him out for more years.
I don't think they want to do that.
At his age, that's going to be difficult. They might be stuck with what, the Ryan cap hit.
Yeah.
Julio Jones is going to be interesting to see if they can do anything with his cap hit.
I think they're stuck with Jones's contract too.
Yeah, so do I. So you got 3 guys right now you could still do a major restructuring of, and maybe do minor deals with Tyler Davis and Chris Lindstrom, who are, kind of not heavily paid, not on long-term, very long-term deals, but you can move money around with those deals a lot easier.
Lindstrom is still on his rookie deal. I mean, how would you restructure that to be less?
You add some roster bonuses and you stretch it out a few years. That's where a lot of dead cap money comes from every year, is guys that you extended to try and get under the cap. You've given them signing bonuses or roster bonuses that you kind of use to offset the cap in future years. Well, you're stuck with it now. I mean, the Falcons right now are at 14 million with dead money after the moves they've made. So, but that's not bad considering a lot of NFL teams. That's actually pretty good.
Yeah,
but you can move money. And I said, there's so many ways you can move money around in the NFL, and it's almost like putting a puzzle together, and you almost have to be kind of a mix between a genius and a mad scientist to be able to make this work. But, you can make it work. But yeah, I really hadn't looked at that before you just brought it up. And I didn't realize that the Falcons were that far under the roster limit so far. And to let people know, and just important, I think, is draft money is already figured into the cap. So you don't have to worry about draft picks and what you're signing draft picks for. All money for draft picks have already kind of been accounted for in the salary cap number.
Yeah, that's important to note.
Right.
But I noticed the 41 players this week. At the time I noticed it was only 39 players because the Falcons have signed a few guys this week. To be under 40 players a week before free agency is pretty amazing as well. So, and you're looking at how they create more space. And if you release anybody like a Dante Fowler or whatever, maybe that makes more space. I don't know the specifics of Fowler's contract, but
you have to be able to renegotiate that somehow.
But
you're not getting out of Fowler what you expected to get in the first place.
Right.
You're seeing you're kind of seeing the Aaron Donald effect on Dante Fowler after leaving the Rams, and you're going to see that same thing with Leonard Floyd coming up. The Aaron Donald effect makes a pretty big difference for guys apparently.
Yeah, he's gotten a few guys paid in free agency. He's those fellow pass rushers should pay him as much as their agents. Maybe, I don't know.
Right.
But my point with the Falcons releasing players, I guess I won't use Dante Fowler as an example because they're not going to release him. I should use Ricardo Allen, somebody they've already released. Yes. They saved money by releasing Ricardo Allen, but now they have a roster spot they have to fill by Ricardo Allen leaving, and you have to find somebody that another safety that's cheaper, and that is the second part that maybe is overlooked when talking about creating space, and that's where the Falcons are right now. They're trying to create space, but they're also in a situation where they're so far behind every other team with where their roster is, just simply filling out the number of minimum players that you need to have. So I think we've covered the salary cap very well, especially from the Falcons' perspective. I do want to say one thing. Younghoe Koo that's a solid signing. Kickers are worth their weight in gold these days. It seems like we're regressing a little bit as far as quality of kickers. And having one that you can count on game in, game out is very important. That was a big signing, I think, for the Falcons. I think so too. Yeah, he's been a very good kicker. And I think probably most people think about the missed kick against the Chiefs because that was it was a forgettable Falcons season, and that was a game where they could have sent the AFC champions into overtime. So you think of that game, but I mean, you can't just grade Younghoe Koo off of that kick. He's had a very good Falcons career so far.
Yes, he has.
I think he deserved that contract, and I'm glad he's back in Atlanta. So that was a good signing. I wanted to mention, because I didn't say it at the top of the show, you can find us on Twitter at TJ Pollen, at DM Holcomb. Send us your comments during the week. If you send us a good comment, we'll get it on next week's show. Or you can always send us a comment while we're live, and we'll read it on air. So we want to make you guys a part of the show. And it was a long time ago now. We've got
where are our commenters? I mean, come on, guys, let's hit it. Let's start firing away here.
Yeah, and I wanted to. You brought up Allen Robinson a while ago, but I wanted to mention, since we do cover fantasy here as well, I wanted to mention Robinson's fantasy value going into next season and take a look back at what he did in 2020, real briefly, because we want to get to some other topics. But Robinson had a really good season. I mean, that's not news to you as a Bears fan.
No, not news to me.
But I think around the country, I mean, Robinson probably went under the radar and is somebody that fantasy owners should have an eye on, and especially depending on what happens with the Bears quarterback situation. We would like the Bears to finally get a franchise quarterback. I know nobody wants that more than you, but it would really help Robinson's fantasy value, because even without a franchise quarterback, he had over 100 catches, over 1,200 yards this past year. The only negative is not a ton of touchdowns, 6 touchdowns, and he had a 12.3 yards per catch average. To be a true dynamic fantasy receiver, we want that average to be higher. We want more touchdowns.
Yes, exactly. And that's kind of what I wanted to ask you. How much does that quarterback situation count against wide receivers when you're trying to evaluate wide receivers for your fantasy team? I would imagine the quarterback plays a very important role in what you have to do, as far as trying to figure out who to bring in.
Absolutely. I mean, quarterbacks are a huge influence really for every fantasy player, to be honest, because if you have a great quarterback, and then that fantasy player with that great quarterback is on a great offense. You want to get players, running backs, tight ends, wide receivers on offenses that are scoring a lot and are very explosive. So that quarterback is a huge factor with any player, but particularly wide receiver, obviously, because there is a correlation between the wide receiver and the quarterback.
What do you think, Zozo?
I would say Robinson is one of those guys that is kind of quarterback proof, I guess, if you will. He's so talented, and he spent his whole career without a quarterback that isn't just a one-year aberration as well. I mean, we've seen him have great seasons with Blake Bortles. So he's always been able to produce without a great quarterback. But if you want him to be a top 10 wide receiver, top 5, or a guy that you can put in your lineup every single week, I had Allen Robinson on my team this past year, and it's a little bit different because it was an 8-team league. So you're really looking for elite players to start in your lineup when you only have an 8-team league. But if you're in a 12-team standard scoring league, Robinson was probably your wide receiver 2 flex position every week, but the consistency probably wasn't there week in, week out. I haven't looked at his game log yet, but that consistency is not there because of the quarterback.
Exactly.
It's not anything Allen Robinson did.
Oh, no, absolutely not. Robinson's quality, and you can tell he's quality, what he's been able to do with subpar quarterbacks. He's kind of allowed some quarterbacks, he allowed Trubisky to look better than Mitch Trubisky actually had any right to look. His ability to come back for the ball and fight for the ball, between 2 or 3 defenders is very impressive. Robinson has a lot of great qualities. He can go get that football. One of the few players in the NFL who really does have that concentration level and, the hands to be able to do that. But yeah, he's just not doing it without a quarterback, and it's going to be interesting to see. I'm beginning to see rumblings that maybe the Seahawks can restructure Russell Wilson, which would mean that, he's off the market. So, and I think he's off the market anyway. One thing people really don't keep in mind, the Bears need him. However, so does Seattle. If Seattle expects to be a playoff team next year, they have to have him. Or, you trade Russell Wilson now, your rebuild starts. There's no way around that. Your rebuild is starting next season if you trade him. If you don't trade him, you still might have playoff possibilities. You definitely have playoff possibilities. You still might be able to make a Super Bowl because anything can happen once you do get into the playoffs. And,
you bring up great points. You're absolutely right. But I am starting to get a little concerned with the Russell Wilson that we continue to hear these rumors that they continue to come up. And it seems like they're not only the same rumors coming up, they're heating up, I guess I'll say. Like, Colin Cowherd on Friday said that he heard a source tell him that the Bears are going to offer a blank check, basically, that they're going to give him an offer they can't refuse, to quote. I think that's exactly how Colin Cowherd put it. I don't know if that's even possible. We just talked about salary cap situations, and the Bears were one of those teams that are in salary cap hell. So how does that work? Do the Seahawks want to rebuild? But to me, because these rumors keep coming up, they're really, to me, that means there is something with Wilson and the Seahawks. There's something going on that relationship is not healthy. And the question just is it repairable or is it beyond repairable, and which makes a trade have to happen?
Well,
no matter what the consequences are for salary cap and whatnot.
Right. One of the things you have to look at, though, is who is spreading the rumor. Who has started the rumor? Where does this rumor come from? And you have to ask that about every rumor. It's possible Russell Wilson's agent has floated this rumor to try and drum up interest and try and see if he can't get more teams interested and try and push the price up, get some competition out there. Is it the Seahawks who've leaked this? Because I insist that the Philadelphia Eagles were the ones who were leaking all the Carson Wentz trade rumors to try and push up demand. You got to look at where these are being leaked from, where all these rumors are coming from. I'm not so sure there is a blank check to be had to the Seahawks for Russell Wilson. I don't care what team it is, Bears or nobody. And yes, the Bears are desperate. Missing on with Mitch Trubisky is really, to me, that should have did in the general manager anyway. Ryan Pace should be looking for a job right now. You're at number 3 and you miss on your quarterback. No, you don't get to stay in your position. He's gotten a second chance. He can't miss again. So the Bears are desperate. But I think a lot of people behind the scenes are taking advantage of that desperation to float rumors out there. And, yeah, occasionally Colin Cowherd gets it. You see a lot of Latin writing, on Bleacher Report or, a lot of these network of websites. So sometimes you don't – you got to consider the source, and we don't know the source.
Right.
And,
no, I agree with what you're saying. I'm not saying that the Bears are definitely offering a blank check or that the Bears are in the market for Wilson. I'm just saying from a Seahawks perspective.
I'm sure the Bears are in the market for Wilson. I'm not going to say that they aren't. Okay. They are in the market for Wilson.
I mean, they should be. They should be.
Yes.
But my point is just with the relationship between Wilson and the Seahawks is this repairable or not? And we saw trade rumors or rumors with Dak Prescott and the Cowboys not settling on a contract. They agreed to a deal, and I'm not that surprised about that. I don't think you are either. But the more and more I hear about Wilson and his discontent with the Seahawks and that offense and Pete Carroll and blah blah blah, it just. The more and more I hear about it, the more and more I feel like it's a trade could happen. That's my only point. Not that anything about the price tag or anything about him going to the Bears.
Right, exactly. A trade could happen.
Yeah. Where like a month ago,
it wouldn't be the first time a coach and his quarterback have not gotten along, though. Let's put it that way too.
Yeah.
So it's not like. That would be a new situation in the NFL. That happens quite a bit on its own.
Just a month ago, if I traveled back in time and came on the show a month ago or 2 months ago and said, Wilson, it's 50-50 now that Wilson is traded, we would have been shocked 2 months ago. I think that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, the fact that we're even talking about it, you're right.
Right.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. We do have a comment from Gary, and he's going to bring us back to our free agency conversation with the salary cap. He asks, who are a few good examples of really good NFL free agents who are particularly going to be hurt with the reduced salary cap? So let's give Gary a few examples. I think you did give a few already, but there are some other guys this week that got released that are already being hurt because they're no longer with their teams, and they're probably looking at a reduced salary with new teams. I mean, the Chiefs released both of their tackles, which is kind of shocking that a Super Bowl contender would have no starting left tackle or right tackle going into the offseason. This may have happened a while ago, not this week, but the Ravens released Mark Ingram. And I think the market for Ingram is going to be very tough for him. And that might not be COVID related because the Ravens have, J.K. Dobbins and they have some other great running backs. So that might not be COVID related. But one team that's particularly hurt by the salary cap and relatable for the Falcons, rival New Orleans Saints, they've released a bunch of players this week and big notable names. I mean, Emmanuel Sanders is out of New Orleans after one season. They released their all-pro punter, Thomas Morstead. Janoris Jenkins is out. Quan Alexander, who was I might be getting my years confused, but did the Saints trade for him at the trade deadline in 2020? Or the 49ers? I don't remember. The 49ers traded for him at the trade deadline in 2019. I think that's it. That's okay. He spent 1 year with the Saints. Same with Sanders, I believe, and he's been released. Maybe not a guy that was what he was before his injury a couple years ago, but again, a notable name. Jared Cook, older player, but another veteran that was released by the Saints. I think all these players
still key members of that team.
Yes, and when you're looking at the Saints, I mean, their situation is heavily relying on what Drew Brees does, and I guess we still don't have a decision from him officially. But
no.
But if he does come back, he's coming back to almost a shell of a team of what they were, last year and the year before when they were, quote unquote, very close to going to the Super Bowl. I mean, they were, in some people's minds, gypped of a Super Bowl trip in 2018. So,
in my mind too. So
that is a team that is really, to answer Gary's question, that is a team that is being very badly hurt by the salary cap going down, and all those Saints players that were released are being hurt as well.
Yes. Yeah, and I think a lot of them are going to have problems finding similar contracts going forward in this new league year. And as I say, after Wednesday, it's going to be interesting to see how all this develops, because you're going to see kind of like a rush of signings once teams can actually officially talk to a player. Now, not to say they haven't unofficially talked to players up to this point or heading up to Wednesday.
Legally, you can start talking to a player. Is it Monday? Is that the legal?
I think you have. Yes, it's your tampering period. This tampering period that.
Yeah.
So yes. So yeah, I think it's Monday you could start talking to players. And Wednesday, you could start, signing them. You can actually ink them to deals. So
now, these players that have been released over this last week, they can talk to teams immediately, though, correct?
Yes, they can.
Because J.J. Watt has already talked to teams.
Right. So you do have that. You're able to talk. Once you're released, you're on the market. You can talk to anybody. You're not going to sign until after the new league year because, the salary cap implications, but you can talk. You can announce a deal.
Yeah.
And, contingent on it being signed, Wednesday or Thursday.
Yeah, I'm just trying to clarify for fans that, it's confusing for me too that, there are players that have already signed. Well, technically they haven't signed. You're correct that you can announce a signing, but you don't sign till Wednesday. And players that have talked to teams already are not, quote unquote, hitting free agency. They've been released this offseason.
Yes. So, I'm interested to see how this develops. It's anybody's guess. I could say that I know how this is going to happen, but, we can both say we know how this is going to happen, but it's anybody's guess how these free agents are going to start spreading out. And the kind of deals that are going to be out there for them. And I'm sure there's a lot of general managers and a lot of front offices are burning the midnight oil, just thinking about different scenarios that they can use to get some of these guys into their camp and try and contend next year.
Absolutely. And I think one of those items, not free agency related, but another item that always has the GMs and scouts burning the midnight oil is the NFL draft, and particularly teams at the top of the draft, whether they're going to take a new young quarterback. And one of those young quarterbacks that we're going to debate over the next month and really over all the entire summer and into his rookie season is Trey Lance from North Dakota State.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of teams at his pro day yesterday, and that has kind of been a signal to some of the insiders and in the NFL media that this kid is for real, that so many teams took his pro day so seriously. The Jets, Falcons, Lions, Panthers, Washington football team, Broncos, Bears, Raiders, Seahawks, and Vikings were all at his pro day.
Well, there's so many teams that, I think a lot of teams are realizing, and maybe not that they didn't realize it before, but they're taking it a lot more seriously, the quarterback position, and getting that quarterback in place early in the draft and having a guy that you can start grooming. Excuse me. Trey Lance was kind of at the bottom of our list of guys that we thought teams are going to be looking at, but and again, from a fantasy perspective, I don't know how you look at this as far as, I guess, dynasty drafting, but I saw some film of Lance performing yesterday, and he was really dropping dimes. He was doing a hell of a job. And he looked like an NFL quarterback back there. Now, the way you look at a pro day, the way you look when you got 4 or 5 300-pound defensive linemen coming in at you, it makes a big difference. But,
right. Yeah.
Lance was throwing the entire route tree, and he was looking good doing it. So, hitting deep balls, hitting guys coming across the field, hitting sideline passes. Very good. So, that's kind of what we're missing without the combine. We don't, we're kind of getting our fix on these pro days as far as getting to know how players are going to look. But, I think Trey Lance looked a lot better than a lot of people were going to give him credit for, and maybe really helped his draft stock. When God, can't talk there for a second. When we get to the NFL draft, I think my mouth was trying to move, or my brain was moving faster than my mouth. Like,
I get what you're saying, and I agree that he didn't hurt his stock for sure yesterday with his pro day performance, and the quarterbacks always, even the ones that we don't think are going to go high. Generally, there are instances where quarterbacks drop, and those there are some famous ones. Aaron Rodgers fell on draft day, but for the most part, quarterbacks don't drop. You got teams going up to trade for quarterbacks and teams overdrafting quarterbacks. So, I'm no draft expert, but after hearing about this pro day and all the teams interested in him, I guess I wouldn't be surprised at this point if Lance is a top 10 pick.
I would say definitely. And again, this is a guy that the Falcons are going to have to take a look at. Because you figure Trevor Lawrence isn't going to fall. You figure the top names aren't going to fall, but Trey Lance is a guy. Yeah, Trey Lance. No, Lawrence isn't falling. Fields isn't falling. But Lance is a guy who could fall. And it's going to be a big decision for this new Falcons front office about how they want to move forward with building this team. Do you go ahead and take the guy, because you're in position, take the guy that you feel is going to be Matt Ryan's successor? Or do you say, well, we still have Matt Ryan at the top of his game for another season or two before, age starts setting in?
Yeah.
And can we build a core that Ryan can work with? So I can't wait. Falcons approach us. It's going to be fascinating to see what direction they take. And I would like to, after the show is over, when we post this, I would like to hear from Falcons fans. Guys, tell us what you think. Where you think this team is going? Because I see two different directions, and I have no idea. And I don't even know if a lot of Falcons fans have an idea right now. You're in Atlanta, Dave. You've got the pulse of the fandom right there.
Well, I mean, I spend a lot of time in my apartment, so the pulse, is my hand on the pulse? I don't know, but I agree with you that, and you know what? The point I would make why we don't know what direction the team is going to go in. It's possible the team doesn't know yet either, and that's why. And that's not. I'm not saying that that's as a bad thing for the Falcons ownership. It's a big decision. They have another month before they have to make it. So they're still weighing their options with what to do. And I hate to continue to hammer home the point about the salary cap, but it's important that, you have to use these draft picks to fill out your roster. And if you're going to use your number one pick to address a position that you already have $40 million tied to, I mean, you have to be able to have enough money or have enough picks to fill out the roster everywhere else. And that is, I think, maybe the decision has to be made in the next week, because what they do in free agency will maybe somewhat signal where they're going at quarterback and where they're going with the roster overall.
That's a great point. I mean, next week we might actually have a clear picture. Be interesting to see.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, every time it seems like, they're sticking with Matt Ryan. They're going to go with Matt Ryan. I mean, the GM came out, I forget when that was. Was that this past week or the week before, and said, we're going to address every position this offseason. We're going to address quarterback. We're going to address wide receiver. And maybe that's just GM speak. We don't know for sure, but
that's GM speak.
Okay.
And I'm telling you, I've been around long enough. I've heard all of this before. I've heard it. I've heard it season after season. And I'm not going to go into how many years that I have heard it, but it's definitely GM speak.
And that has a lot to do with what I've been pointing out over the last few weeks, that, the Falcons, if they're not going to go quarterback, they want the price for the number 4 pick to go up for the team that does go quarterback with Trey Lance or whatever. Yes. So they want more picks if Falcons end up deciding quarterback's not what they're going with in the top 5. So
the problem is I can argue for either decision. I can make an argument for it. And that's the rough part. I can make an argument for the Falcons holding on to Matt Ryan. I can make an argument for the Falcons, trading back, holding on to Matt Ryan, or, taking the next quarterback that you're going to groom in his place. You can argue both ways, and that's what makes it so difficult to predict. And Nostradamus is, out, passed out from a rough season. He's emptied the crystal beer mugs a few times, so I can't ask Nostradamus who's gonna win these things. And he's not gonna sober up until sometime next August or week 1. So we'll see. But
I hope it's before that he sobers up. Maybe we get a couple of picks for the draft from Nostradamus.
Oh, Nostradamus does not do drafts.
No, he doesn't do draft. Well, what about post-draft? Can we have Nostradamus appear the Saturday after?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
That's the thing. I've done mock drafts before, and it's an interesting process. And I truly suck at them. I am just terrible at them.
Is there anybody good at mock drafts, though? I mean,
the only ones that are actually good at mock drafts are the ones that put about, 3 or 4 dozen out there before the actual day, where they can point to a certain draft and say, well, yes, I did have him going to this team. Well, yeah, you had him going to 24 other teams too. But, in this mock draft, yes, you got it right.
I think the mock drafts that are good are the ones that maybe predict the correct position that's going to the team.
Yes.
Or maybe a mock draft that does a really good job of filling in fans about the players.
Yes.
Not necessarily predicting exactly where each player is going to go. I mean, nobody knows that. So
nobody knows. I agree with you, and I've never gotten a pick right yet. So that's telling you right there.
I mean, there's years
it's kind of how I grade drafts afterwards. It's not necessarily you can't grade the player because you have no idea. How has the team done to address their needs? What kind of steps have they made to address their needs? Has it been positive? Do you think they've overlooked, a position? That's kind of how I grade a draft, because you can never grade a player coming out of college. But you're right, and that's the great way to do a mock draft too. I mean, that points to the way you just said about mock drafts. Grade the position. Is the team? What's going to be available to the team at their position, and who do you think is going to be the best player?
Yeah. There's also cases where you can grade a pick based on, did they reach for that player? There might be cases where a team reaches, and then it ends up being a great pick. But there usually is a general consensus of this player is a second-round pick or a third-round pick, and if he goes in the first round, then that was a reach.
Right.
So that's how I agree. That's how you grade drafts, and not necessarily whether or not the player is going to be good or not. We really don't know that on draft night or draft weekend. Right. And sometimes a player is great for 1 year and then is bad the rest of his career, or vice versa. He doesn't figure it out in his first season, and player analysts say, "Oh, well, he was a bust," but then he figures it out after.
I mean, look at Ryan Tannehill, or there are other names I can't come up with on the top of my head, but there are names out there where you kind of say, where did this guy come from? And he's they've emerged. You didn't see him in the draft, but they emerge as top players, or they just don't cut it. It's really a crapshoot, and it really depends on your scouting when you're going into this situation. And not having a combine this year is really setting a lot of NFL teams back. You're going to have to do a great job with your scouting department to figure out the players you want, the players you think that are going to improve your team. Absolutely.
We got to get going. We're past the hour mark. We'll be talking a lot more draft in the weeks to come. It is the Atlanta Sports Unlimited channel with our brand new show name, the NFL Jocks and Pigskins. We'll be back next Saturday. Follow Tom at TJ Pollen on Twitter, at DM Holcomb for me. Catch you later, everybody.
Have a great week.